Meet Mike Cannon-Brookes, the outspoken Aussie tech maverick who built a software empire valued at more than $100 billion at its top. As the co-founder of Atlassian, he's behind software giants like Jira and Confluence that revolutionized how tech companies operate and made him the richest Aussie in tech. But Cannon-Brookes isn't just a tech entrepreneur. He's a rebel with a cause, shaking up the status quo. Mike's ambitions stretch far beyond software. He famously challenged Elon Musk to solve South Australia's energy crisis with Tesla batteries and has poured billions into climate tech. His bold $8 billion takeover bid for Australia's biggest energy provider, AGL, aimed to force them to phase out coal faster. Cannon-Brookes also stormed the sports world, becoming a co-owner of the South Sydney Rabbitohs and the first Aussie to hold a stake in the NBA's Utah Jazz. But success didn't come easy. This is the gripping story of how Mike Cannon-Brookes battled obstacles and naysayers to become a global powerhouse. The story begins in 1979 in the United States. Mike Cannon-Brookes' life took an adventurous turn when his family moved to Australia when he was just 5 years old. His father, an English international banking executive, found a new home for the family down under. At the age of 7, Mike was sent to boarding school in England, separating him from his parents for most of his young years. The frequent flights between London and Sydney became the foundation for Mike's future in technology.
And at the back was this computer, an Amstrad PC-20, 4-color, masterful device. And so I was like, I guess I'll get that. And it was how I got my first computer of myself, my own, at 8.5 through frequent fly points.
Back in Australia, Mike's journey continued at the prestigious Cranbrook School, a breeding ground for some of the country's most affluent and successful individuals. Reports suggest that he vied for the title of Dux, top student, in his class, showcasing his drive from a young age. Mike's journey into the tech world began with a prestigious computer science scholarship, where he soon realized that the corporate path was not for him.
I spent 6 months just plugging in machinery. It was the most boring 6-month assignment. I can say that now. Nortel's out of business. So it was not a fun or exciting 6 months. And I think that was one of those signs that maybe the big corporate thing wasn't so much for me. I was like, man, if this is what work life's going to be like, this sucks.
Yeah.
After his first assignment, Mike dropped out of the scholarship program alongside a fellow scholarship student to launch the startup Bookmark Box. They aimed to sync people's bookmarks across browsers through a web app. While they raised some money from friends and family, they quickly realized they couldn't compete with their American competitor Blink.com, which had just raised $35 million. They decided to strike a deal with Blink.com, leading to the sale of Bookmark Box. Although the venture didn't become a runaway success, Mike recalls the experience of building a company from scratch as invaluable.
And I've always said it was a 1-year amazing experience, right? The two of us, I can viscerally remember the formative moment. We got an office in a local kind of what would now be an accelerator or incubator at the Australian Technology Park. And the office was a room about the size of this podcast studio. And we got our own whiteboard and we had a table and we walked in and the two of us were like, right.
After selling Bookmark Box, Mike sent out an email to his peers, proposing an audacious idea to skip the conventional grad jobs waiting for them and join him in trying something new. Anything, as long as it didn't involve joining a corporation.
Right, like even if we built a really crappy company and we'd been able to kind of survive and go through, that would have been more exciting to me than going to work in a very large company with a suit and tie, as all our friends, were sort of heading to do. It just wasn't my thing,
Scott, whom Mike met at the University of New South Wales, also had negative experiences with corporations such as IBM, PwC, and ASX. He was the only one who replied. The two turned out to be a match made in heaven, always maintaining an informal and playful relationship. A great example is their unique way of dealing with disputes.
And we put in Rochambeau or rock, paper, scissors, into our shareholders agreement. And so it's changed now. We're a public company. We can't solve problems like that anymore.
Yeah.
But, for the first few years, if we disagreed, it would have ended up at rock, paper, scissors.
Scott and Mike got together without a clear idea of what kind of company they wanted to start. Their first idea was to provide support for software produced by a Swedish company which they found to be great but lacking in customer service. Although they gained some traction, they soon realized that support was not very scalable, as clients sought assistance only for the most challenging and complex problems. They realized that selling software was far more lucrative and enjoyable than endlessly providing support. While providing support services, they were developing applications for internal use. Among their internal tools were an email archiving application, a support system named the Atlassian Support System, which later became Jira, and a knowledge base to store documentation online. Their breakthrough moment was when they decided to sell their internal applications as software products.
Tonight, for the first time, a couple of contenders from the young entrepreneurs category have taken out the overall award. Mike Cannon-Brookes and Scott Farquhar set up their IT company, Atlassian, at the age of 22.
Mike's co-founder argues that their business model was the most important reason for their success.
But not today. These days you download enterprise software in the same way you would download a computer game. And I just think we were at the forefront of how that happened. And almost the thing we built in that model is actually almost less important than the fact that we changed the business model of how people adopted software to be much more consumer-like.
In the early days of Atlassian, Mike and Scott had to hustle to make their company look more mature than it actually was.
And in the early days, our website would always make it seem like we were bigger than we were. We'd say Atlassian has a number of international offices. That number just happened to be one.
On the sales and marketing side, they showed creativity and inventiveness.
And so we were at a conference in Belgium, which is one of the biggest technology conferences. And they had a session where they were going to do a live podcast at 3:00 in the afternoon in front of an audience, right? And so we asked them if we could provide beer for their session for the sort of 500-600 people that are watching them, the three of them on this panel podcast. And of course they said, sure, yeah, whatever, that sounds great. We didn't ask the conference organizers, of course, because we would have gotten in trouble and it wouldn't have worked. So instead, we took our little rental car to a local bottle shop and bought as many cases of really good Belgian beer as we could. And then we stood at the front as people were going in, and every time someone walked in, we would put a sticker that said Atlassian on the front of the beer as if it was kind of our beer, and then give it to the attendees, right? And they thought this was fantastic. This was like the best session ever, and we had 4 or 5, everyone on stage had one, and we would just do sort of stunt marketing like that to the right communities, which got our name kind of known.
Atlassian's growth journey was fueled by a viral effect. Instead of focusing on individual users like most companies aiming for virality in the B2B space, they recognized the power of teams in driving adoption. By targeting one team and enabling them to solve a problem brilliantly with their application, they created ambassadors within an organization. Team members collaborated with other teams and became internal representatives of their tools, creating a chain reaction of adoption. Along the way, Atlassian never raised funding. In an interview, Mike explains why he never got funding.
So we actually haven't raised any institutional funding.
Right, that's right.
At all.
Yeah. So why was that? By choice or because you just couldn't get any?
As I like to say, in 2002, A, it was nuclear winter for tech.
Right.
B, we were two knuckleheads with no experience. Mm-hmm. And C, we're in Australia. So we didn't even bother, to be honest, to try to get funding in the early days.
In hindsight, this has been very formative for the company's journey.
And it really was a process of constraints. I really think if we had grown up in Silicon Valley and had venture capital around us, that we would have built a very different company that wouldn't have been as disruptive as ours has been, because we didn't have venture capital. We didn't have people that had done it before to sort of drag us back to the mean. And we just grew up without anyone telling us the way, it couldn't be done.
We could probably sell this thing to someone. We had taken no capital, no investment. We still owned 100% of the company. We could probably sell this thing and be pretty set, right? And it sounds naive now what we actually thought we were going to get for it. And we kind of, we did a lot of really good talking and thinking and realized that we weren't done.
They didn't sell Atlassian, but Mike did pursue other ambitions outside of the company. He had become a powerful advocate for climate action and put his money where his mouth is. He made a variety of impactful investments in renewable energy, including a $78 million stake in Bright and over $100 million in the driverless vehicle company Zoox. His ambitious Sun Cable project aims to export solar energy from Australia to Asia via an undersea cable, further solidifying his commitment to a sustainable future. His biggest move so far was an $8 billion takeover bid for AGL, with a promise to invest another $20 billion to phase out coal by 2030, instead of the expected date of 2045.
I'm Mike Cannon-Brookes, and today I represent the largest shareholder of AGL.
The AGL bid was rejected, and in response, he bought an 11.27% stake in the company to play the role of an activist investor. South Australia's power outages led to a great story. In 2017, he engaged in a playful Twitter challenge with none other than Elon Musk about installing Tesla batteries to solve the outages. After extensive lobbying, this resulted in the installation of a massive Tesla battery in South Australia, 3 times bigger than any other battery in the world. Besides green investments, Mike also invests in sports. He is a co-owner of the South Sydney Rabbitohs Rugby League Club and has made a name for himself in the sporting world by becoming the first Aussie to own a stake in an NBA team, the Utah Jazz.